Awesome. Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the second part of our employer webinar series. If you can please let me know if you have issues hearing me, let me know. We are very excited to have you joining us today for the second part of our employer webinar series, Building Tomorrow's Workforce. Again, I'm Alejandra Bejarano, and I work with Region 9 Development Commission, leading economic development programming throughout Greater Minnesota, specifically in South Central Minnesota. We're based in Mankato, and we are a regional development organization. And we're very excited to have you here today with us. I'm going to pass it to Mercedes so she can introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you again. I'm Mercedes Sempe. I work with Alejandra with workforce development. I was here in the last part of the webinar as well. And I'm really happy to be here with you all. Ale, do you want me to start sharing the presentation right now?
Yes, before we dive into the agenda, I was going to quickly recap our last meeting, but if you can please start sharing your screen. And if folks have issues seeing that, let us know. Again, thank you for joining our Building Tomorrow's Workforce series. We are on the part 2, but 2 weeks ago we met for part 1 of our webinar series, and we wanted to take a moment to recap what we covered in our last session. We started by exploring the significant role international talent can play in addressing labor challenges in Greater Minnesota. And we talked about the different demographic changes that the region is going through, like declining birth rates and an aging population, combined with rapid increase in skills required jobs, and how international students can play a key role in addressing some of those challenges and also reshaping our regional workforce. So we have heard from a lot of employers on the different solutions and initiatives that they would like to see, and that's why we decided to put on this 2-part webinar series. We also got to very briefly hear about the different work pathways there are to hire international students, and today we're going to be taking a deeper dive at those. So please feel free to ask questions, comment, and use the chat or the mic to unmute. Last time we also got to meet and hear from great speakers like we will today. We, in our last webinar series, had Midwest speakers like Nicholas Hockenberry, who's Director of Workforce Programming at Greater Dubuque Development Corporation in Iowa. So we got to hear about other initiatives and examples throughout the Midwest of different regions and states who are leading initiatives around international student recruitment and talent retention. We also got to hear from a great line of speakers who are international students themselves here in town going to local colleges. So I invite you all to please watch the recording that's up on our website if you weren't able to join us last time. And we also got to hear from MNSU staff, specifically an internship coordinator, who gave us specific strategies and steps that employers can take to attract and retain international students. So we discussed job description, recruiting, and hiring, and we're hoping that that can be a strong foundation for us to move on into our second part of our webinar series. And we're very excited to be welcoming a great line of speakers that we have today. Our session today will be focused on creating welcoming environments in the workspace, understanding HR and legal insights necessary to hire and integrate international students. So we're very excited to have experts joining us today who will be sharing practical insights and examples that have worked in their field of work. So with that, I would like to pass it to Mercedes to get us started. And thank you again all for being here.
Well, I'm just going to briefly go through the agenda for today. We have a very packed day. We're going to start hearing from Suzanne Sierra. She's the Executive Director for the St. Louis Mosaic Project. And she's going to be talking about creating welcoming environments, how to integrate international students into our workforce. So we're really excited to have Suzanne here. Afterwards, we're going to be talking with Sandra Feist. She's an immigration lawyer who specializes in work-related cases. So we're going to be discussing legal pathways and everything related to the legal aspects and the paperwork associated with hiring international students. I would like to clarify that all of the sections will be open to questions. As Ale was saying, please feel free to ask questions at any point. We will devote the last few minutes of each speaker to addressing specific questions in the chat, but feel free to go ahead and write them as they speak so that we can also address them as we go. And after talking about the legal pathways, we are going to hear from Celeste Foss. She is the talent acquisition leader at Bolton & Menk, and she specializes in HR. So she will be addressing how to hire and retain international students. Finally, and just for the last few minutes, Ale and I will share some resources with you, which we're also going to send out on a follow-up email, and we're going to let you know about some upcoming events that you may want to join as well. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce again our first speaker, Suzanne Sierra, again, Executive Director for the St. Louis Mosaic Project, which is a part of a regional economic development agency for the county and the city of St. Louis. We're super excited to be hearing from her, so I'm just going to pass it on to her.
Thank you so much, Mercedes and Alejandra, and to my fellow panelists. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. So I'm trying to share my screen. Are you seeing it? Ah, there it is. Okay, it just takes a minute to pop up. So as Mercedes said in her introduction of me, I'm the Executive Director of the St. Louis Mosaic Project, and I want to start out by just giving you a little bit of context of who we are and where we sit in our regional landscape when it comes to economic development and working with employers and international students. So we are part of, as it said in the introduction, we're part of this economic development partnership, which is an agency that focuses on economic strategies for both the city of St. Louis and the county of St. Louis. And so it encompasses the entire metropolitan statistical area, which is the city, county, and then 15 surrounding counties. Underneath the partnership is the World Trade Center of St. Louis, and that's one of 100 World Trade Centers in 300 different countries. They are focused on international economic development. And three of the elements required for success for international economic development are trade, investment, and people. And the St. Louis Mosaic Project is an initiative of the World Trade Center, and we really focus on that people component. And we were started in 2012 because we were in the 80s, one of the 10th largest metros. We had a bustling downtown, big population. And now we're actually, we just learned the new data is that we're the 24th largest metro. So what happened and what is happening around the country is that our region is losing population. Companies are leaving and people are leaving. Right now, we are in what we call a demographic winter, which means that we have more deaths than births. The only growth, though we have lost 6,000 individuals, we've gained 3,000, and it is entirely through the international population. And so back in 2012, this trend was starting, and economic development and civic leaders said we need to look at what's happening with peer cities similar in size to St. Louis, to see what they have that's growing their economy that St. Louis is missing, and it was immigration. So that was specifically why Mosaic was established, and specifically why it was a very strategic move to put us within an economic development agency versus, trying to be part of the city government or the county government. And so we really, our goals, so when we started, we had set a very ambitious goal. And again, if you think about 10 years ago, things were very different with the immigration landscape. There was even on the horizon the idea that there was going to be big immigration reform. And so we set a very ambitious goal at the time of transforming St. Louis into the fastest growing major metro for immigration by the year 2025. Well, last September, that is exactly what happened. The U.S. Census Bureau and the ACS demographic info showed that St. Louis did indeed rank as the fastest growing major metro for immigration. And so that was in September, and then fast forward to January and everything that's happened, since then. But back in the fall, we said, okay, we set our initial goal. So what's our goal? And our goal now is to maintain that ranking through the year 2030 and to drive initiatives that expand and retain a global talent pool as one of the cornerstones of our region's growth. And when we talk about the international community in St. Louis, we're talking about company transfers, refugees, and international students. So in our region, we have about 9,000 international students that are studying at one of 6 regional universities. And so the way that we operate is we are a very, very small team of 3 people. And we really are tasked with being educators and communicators about what does it mean to be welcoming. And that means that we are always, through collaboration, through media outreach, through presentations, through one-on-one meetings, we are always trying to educate people about, number one, who is the foreign-born population in St. Louis? Literally, who are they? What is the economic impact and benefit to the region to have a growing immigrant population? And then how can our broader community connect with them? And it starts with businesses. We were very, very intentional when Mosaic was launched that we needed to bring the business community along from the get-go, because if the business community didn't understand who was in their backyard and how they could hire this foreign-born talent, then that's really the key, because this is all about growing the economy, right? And people often ask us, well, what are foreign-born individuals and international students, what do they want? They want to work, they want to put roots down, and they want to contribute to society like all of us do. And so, one of the things that we do, again, we're not a service organization, so we're not working on immigration issues, we're not working on the optional practical training, we're not helping students from that perspective. But what we do is we work as again, we're a catalyst for connection. And so we are all about making these warm introductions and being a one-stop resource for companies. So you'll see this is our one-page info sheet. And these are all the programs that we have. And you'll see on here that we have a Mosaic ambassador programs where we have 56 ambassador companies. And what that means is that once a month, we try to announce a new ambassador company. Well, what is an ambassador company? We make the barrier to entry very, very easy and low. And what that means is that it is a company, and we have large companies like a MasterCard all the way down to small businesses that publicly align with our vision of being welcoming. And the way that that looks for all 56 companies is completely different, because it depends on the size of the company. But what that says is that, and we bring our ambassador companies together once a year, and we offer them updates on what's happening with immigration at the local level. We talk about many more of the resources here that can help their international employees connect to the community. But it really starts with educating the corporate world about the fact that they can hire international students. And so you see, we also have something here called the Global Talent Hiring Program. And so what we do with that is that we work with our university partners. We work with the career advisors, the international career advisors, and the international student support offices, and many of the international student-led organizations, again, to be that kind of connector point. One of the things that, we just know, and we've been doing this work for 10 years, is that repetition is key. Our key points are that, we try to, and particularly in this day and age, I mean, and I'm literally talking about right now with what's happening in the world and all of the news that is just coming at us like an open faucet. Every day there's some new development about immigration and what does that mean, and the international students that are being deported. And we really just try to demystify what's happening. And in many cases, the only thing we can do is make sure that companies and international students know that they're not alone in this, that we are a resource where they can come to ask questions, to talk about the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty. Our brand is welcoming, and more than ever, we are trying to really reinforce our core value, which is welcoming and hope. And what we tell, companies, what we try to do is demystify the fact that at the end of the day, we're encouraging you to hire the best and the brightest. These international students who come into any market, they still believe in the American dream. And yes, it's going to school, but the piece that's always missing is the employer aspect, right? They are eager and ready and willing and loyal to work for companies for that experience. And we have, and so it's very, very individual. As I said, I mean, we've been doing this work for 10 years. And we also know that there's always turnover at companies, right? And so it's always a constant educating, informing about the fact that there is a global talent pool for companies of all sizes to tap into. Sometimes we work with companies that they're startups, or they're just small companies, and they don't even have an immigration attorney in-house. And so they may immediately think it's too daunting, it's too complicated for me to do. But that's where we serve as a resource and make introductions to companies that can either work as their in-house immigration attorneys, or connect them to other companies that have hired international students to talk about how they did it. So again, we really just work as that, kind of a matchmaker, if you will, or a connector. And some of the ways that we work with companies too is that we also let them know about other resources that are available in St. Louis that can help their international employees connect with the community. So our largest foreign-born populations here are from India, China, and Mexico. And so oftentimes, and the universities tell us this too, that international students, because often they stay on campus. I don't know what it's like in your regions, but they often don't get to really know the rest of the city or the metropolitan area and what's out there for them. And so we work very closely with our ethnic chambers. We have a very active Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, an Asian American Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce, and a African Chamber of Commerce. And so we tell companies, let your employees know about that resource, because they can then connect with that community and find other people that literally look like them, sound like them, and are going to help them, more deeply acclimate into the region. And so it's just very, very individual. We also work with companies to, a lot of times international employees, again, we give them information about volunteer opportunities. So it's really just showing companies that it can be a very successful fit. We also remind companies that, if you look at your general turnover, new employees are usually staying for about 3 years. International students, if they have a STEM major, can work for you on their student visa for up to 3 years. What we tell our international students is we try to teach them to become irresistible to employees, so that at the end of a OPT or yes, OPT or even oh, I'm blanking on the other CPT, that the company says, wow, this employee, this student, this graduate was so wonderful that we are going to go ahead and sponsor them. And so it's really just letting the companies and the international student community and everyone know that they're not alone in this. And that, yes, these are confusing times, but there are solutions. And we try to remember to live in the solution and not in the problem. And that there are a lot of resources, a lot of experts to lean into. One of the things we did last year that we launched, again, the statistic came out about the fact that St. Louis was the #1 fastest growing for 2025. That was amazing news. It coincided with the World Trade Center. They have an annual business lunch every year in the fall. That is one of the must-attend events, and more than 700 CEOs and business leaders come to the meeting, and there's always a panel. This particular meeting happened to be focused on global talent, local impact. So it actually featured all of the way that Mosaic works. And so we decided that we had this captive audience in the room of decision makers. And the whole focus was about this global talent that's in our backyard. And how can companies that might never have thought of or wanted to connect with these international students, how could we help them bridge the gap? How could we just make it a little bit easier, if you will? So we announced, and this was it with the support of the mayor of the city and the county executive, we announced a challenge. And during the meeting, we said that we were going to challenge 10 companies in the city and 10 companies in the county to hire an international student for a paid summer internship. And our goal was 20. And we have about 16 companies signed up to do that. And so what that means is we just put together a quick little form and we made it very easy. And so now we're going to be able to talk about that. We're going to be able to do a press release and get some publicity about the fact that these companies are hiring international students, and then what's the experience been with international students and how does that help the economy? So a lot of what we do is educating, informing, and a lot of storytelling. Because if we're not giving examples and highlighting what's working, people aren't going to know. And so that really kind of encapsulates what I wanted to share with you this morning. I hope it's given you some food for thought. And I think at this point, I will turn it back over to Mercedes.
Thank you, Suzanne. That was very helpful. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a question.
Of course.
You were saying that the help you provide to companies who are hiring international students is very individual, it's very specific to each company, but I was wondering if you have any success story, any specific story that you think is worth sharing about what a company did. Do you have like specific steps or something that other employers could model so that they can also create welcoming environments in their own companies?
I mean, we don't, the examples I can give you are really just kind of, anecdotal, if you will. I mean, at the end of the day, the fact that we have 16 companies that have signed up for this challenge is probably the most robust example I can give you, because these are companies that aren't necessarily our ambassador companies, right? And so, so that's one example of, now they haven't hired them, but we are hopeful that is where it's going to lead. And so, but I can tell you that we also work with the students as well to really educate them about the U.S. workplace culture. And really at the end of the day, we can do the matchmaking, but it's going to be up to the hiring manager and the student to really prove their worth, right? I mean, just like with any of us. And so one of the things that we're very intentional about doing is holding webinars for the students that teach them how to become irresistible, and understanding that there is a cultural competency that may be missing because our American way is very, hi, how are you? Let me tell you about myself. And that's very foreign, no pun intended, for these international students. And so we have a wonderful example of a woman um, who attended a job fair. She attended a job fair here. She came to the U.S. on a tennis scholarship. She barely spoke English. She was from I want to say she's from Spain, if I'm not mistaken. She was a Spanish speaker. She is a Spanish speaker. She came here. She spoke no English, and she just did everything she could to make herself successful. You know, all the things. She was lonely, she was scared, blah, blah, blah. But she went to this job interview and she got an internship, a paid internship with Worldwide Technologies, which is a local company that's really one of our most successful companies here in the region. And she made herself irresistible and they hired her full time. We have several examples of that. And so it's the combo of the company going to the job fair, the company not immediately thinking, we don't sponsor. The company staying open-minded and willing to consider it. And then the student, I mean, a lot of it, right, is being prepared and being in the right place at the right time. But it also starts with the employers not automatically saying, we can't or won't do this. Why not? I would just challenge any employers on here to really ask themselves, why not? And to just try it. And so, I mean, those are the best examples we can give you. We're a staff of 3. We don't do a lot of, deep tracking per se. I mean, we know when folks are hired, and we keep in touch with them, and then we tell that story. But we're very hopeful to see what comes out of this intern challenge, and we hope that it can result in more of these success stories for ultimate hiring.
That's great. Thank you, Suzanne. I really appreciate that. We don't have questions in the chat, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. And if we don't get to address them in time, we can also send a follow-up email afterwards. Ale, if you have any questions, go ahead. Otherwise, we can continue with our next speaker. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you. I don't see any questions, but feel free to put them in the chat again or on mute. We will have time at the end too for extra questions and Q&A. And we'll have all of our speakers in case there are any lingering thoughts or questions. Thank you, Suzanne. I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Sandra Feist, who's a founding attorney at Feist Law and Advocacy with over 20 years of experience in the field of immigration, specifically in the emphasis of employment-based immigration. She also serves as state representative for the House and is an adjunct professor of law at the University of St. Thomas Law School. We're very excited to have you joining us, Sandra, and I would like to pass the floor to you to introduce yourself and get us going.
Great, thank you so much. So let's see if I can share my window again. I did it before, so that was a success. So presentation, and then make it full screen, and then get onto the right page. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, great. Well, I do have an update that I am no longer an adjunct at the University of St. Thomas. It turned out that 2 full-time jobs and 2 children were enough on my plate, but I loved being a teacher for those few years. So thanks so much for inviting me here today. Full disclosure, I get really into the PowerPoint technology, so my PowerPoint is like kind of graphically intense, so enjoy. Hope it doesn't overwhelm folks. Definitely anyone can reach or can pipe in with any questions as I go. Some of the content I have is pretty technical and I'll kind of gloss over it and hit the highlights. But if anybody has any questions, I'm really happy to kind of make this presentation what is most relevant and helpful to the attendees. So feel free to take me off course if you're like, this is not what I came for. So as mentioned, I've been working in the field of immigration law since 2001 was when I started as a paralegal, and I've been an attorney since 2007. And I was elected to the Minnesota State House of Representatives in 2021. So really high level points I'd like to make. First is that foreign workers can often fill roles that employers struggle to fill due to geography or just difficult to find skill sets. In particular, I work with companies that have trouble attracting people to their area. And immigration has been a way for them to be able to entice people to come and work for them with the skills that they need. Sponsoring foreign workers for work visas and green cards can also be a really great recruitment and retention tool. And I guess that relates to my first point too. But it's a way to build loyalty and build a relationship and a shared commitment. And so, you can look at it in that way, not just an effort by the employer to sponsor someone, but also as a way to show a commitment and a long-term reciprocal commitment between employer and employee. It is ideal at this moment in particular to work with an expert when you're sponsoring someone. The immigration laws are already really complicated, and they also are currently in a real state of flux. Just not the laws, because Congress never seems to want to update anything, except for the worse, but the process is just really in a period of a lot of fluidity. And I did also want to mention, one of the things that I was really excited to do when I first got elected was to champion the creation of our Office of New Americans. And so we passed that legislation last term. And the Office of New Americans is within the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And their whole job is to really help immigrants who settle in Minnesota to integrate into our workforce at their highest level of capability as quickly as possible. And so sometimes those are challenges that specific communities face. Sometimes it's specific to different occupations. And so just want to lift up the Office of New Americans as a really great resource. And also someone that if you're constantly encountering certain challenges, a good person to tell, because they are within state government and can be in a position to let others know and to do something about it. So really high level overview of immigration. You've got your non-immigrant temporary visas, your green card holders, and then you've got US citizens. So temporary work visas are specific to the specific purpose. So a lot of times they're really specific, like it's a religious worker or an exchange visitor. Sometimes it's, what's called a specialty occupation worker. So someone whose job requires a related bachelor's degree. They do have restrictions on travel, on whether their family members can work. So those are non-immigrant temporary work visas. And I'll go through a few of the main ones. Permanent residents or green card holders can be in the United States indefinitely and work for whoever they want, whenever they want. And it's difficult to deport people, or it used to be sorry, I have to not be like snarky. These are difficult times, and I will not, I don't want to be glib. Anyway, it should be very difficult to deport people who have green cards. It is easier when somebody's on a temporary visa for them to be sent out of the US. And then you've got US citizens. And US citizens, like green card holders, they can travel when they want. They can work for whoever they want. They also can sponsor certain additional relatives. They can receive any types of public assistance. They cannot be deported. And they also can spend time outside the US. You don't care about that. So, sorry, I'm trying to do a little bit more high level. But those are the three basic categories. And actually, I didn't mention them here because it's not, it is relevant. I should have put it into my graphic, but we also have humanitarian categories of workers, and they're not necessarily visas. So we've got our humanitarian parolees, people who came from Ukraine, people who came from Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, Nicaragua, who came because they were fleeing violence. And under the Biden administration, they created a specific mechanism for those people to come here and work here. The parolees have their own kind of level of vulnerability and temporary nature of their presence, but they also are here and allowed to work in a lot of cases. So I'm going to talk about a few of the types of work visas that you are most likely to encounter. That is the H-1B workers, which is what I mentioned, the specialty occupation workers. So these are people who are whose jobs require a specific bachelor's in a specific field. We have temporary seasonal workers. So H-2A is temporary seasonal agricultural workers. And H-2B is those non-agricultural seasonal workers, so people who are working, for example, at a resort. O1s are a very flexible category, which is why I wanted to touch on them. They are for people who are special, so people who have won certain types of awards, who are particularly well-known and innovative in their fields, and that can be any field. J1 exchange visitors come in a variety of categories. And these I wanted to mention as well because a lot of the work can be done by the program sponsor. And these are people who can come and work for you with minimal effort in a lot of cases. And then F1 students we will talk about as well. So H-1B workers, and I'm going to go pretty fast and pretty high level because I think that the minutia is not the purpose of this presentation. But if anybody's interested in any of these points, I'm happy to slow down a bit. But H-1B work visas are limited each year to 65,000 and then an additional 20,000 for graduate degree holders who earn their degree in the United States. Because of the annual limits and because there are more than 85,000 foreign workers each year who employers would like to hire, we end up with a really dumb random lottery system each spring. And so this will be in a future slide, but I'll talk a little bit about kind of how you want to time out sponsoring an H-1B worker. And then I also am going to talk about cap exemptions, which means you're exempt from that cap of 85,000 per year. So I have a slide to talk in a bit more detail about that. And then I am going to just touch on the 6-year limit. So H-1Bs are limited to only 6 years, but if you start the green card process before their 6th year begins, then they can extend beyond. So you can get a little more than 6 years out of them. And then hopefully they can stay permanently when they get their green card. So cap exempt H-1B options exist. The most common, universities are exempt from the limit. So whatever your job, if it requires a bachelor's degree and it is directly for a university, then you don't need to worry about the H-1B lottery or the limits per year. There are also broad exemptions for nonprofits that are affiliated with institutions of higher education. And this includes schools. So for example, if you are a school that has an agreement with a local university or even a not local university that sends student teachers, that would be considered an affiliation and would permit that school to sponsor H-1B workers all year round. So we work a lot with schools that sponsor teachers. Notably, one of the other things that I did a whole lot of really minutia type of work in at the state legislature that impacts immigrants in a lot of times unseen ways. But our state laws around licensure renewals said that you could not apply for a new license until after July 1st each year. And that was requiring schools to pay extra to expedite their H-1Bs for teachers. And it was just really dumb because there was no reason that it was July 1st. It had been written into law. And so we changed the law so that if teachers do need to apply earlier in the year in order to avoid having to pay that extra expedite fee to the federal government, they're allowed to do so. So that is just something to be aware of if you're a school interested in sponsoring a teacher. Nonprofit research organizations and also people who are employed at an exempt institution are also exempt. And I'm not going to go into more detail on that because it's really wonky. But just so you know, there's a variety of scenarios where you might be able to get around the H-1B lottery, and you should always try to do so if you can. So in terms of sponsoring an H-1B worker, as I mentioned, there is the cap subject scenario. So that's all your really straightforward private for-profit businesses. I always recommend to my clients and to anyone who reaches out throughout the year that you start actively moving forward with that sponsorship at the beginning of each year. And so that gives you time to make sure you've done all of your hiring and recruiting and HR paperwork, and have a relationship with an attorney or not for the registration, but like that you are basically ready to go as soon as that registration period opens, which happens in March every year. And so if you are just a regular company in anywhere in the country, think about this throughout the year, and then January 1st, say it's H-1B season, let's make sure all of our ducks are in a row. So the process of filing an H-1B, you will need at least a week, just because there's a pre-certification requirement of a form that is filed electronically with the Department of Labor. So you can't file it the next day, but you can file it fairly quickly. And then, as I mentioned, you can pay extra to get a reasonable turnaround. I think $2,805 is an obscene amount of money to ask the federal government to do its job in a reasonable amount of time, but that is how much they are currently charging. So seasonal workers are H-2As and H-2Bs. H-2Bs, like the H-1Bs, H-1Bs, that sounds weird, H-1s, can be difficult because of the numerical caps. And so you have to time it just perfectly. And even if you do, you might not get one. But these require that you show that you can't find a sufficient number of US workers who are willing and qualified to do the jobs offered. So that is seasonal workers. O1s are a good option if you don't have that H-1B option, either because they are I was going to use tennis, but tennis coaches and tennis players are actually their own unique conundrum. But if they have a degree that's just not related to the job that they are so talented at doing, you could look at an O1. So here you're looking at, have they written articles? Maybe they have a patent. Are there articles about them? These can be people who are scientists. They can be artists and entertainers, athletes. It's totally flexible. And that's the nice thing about O's, and to a lesser extent, but still H-1Bs, is that it's across a broad spectrum of occupations and roles. There are no numerical limits on O's. You can extend them indefinitely. And so they're a great classification if you can fit. They aren't always easy, but if you can get it, it might be the only option and worth going for. So J-1 exchange visitors, these are run through the Department of State. The Department of State created this classification of visa as basically a foreign policy tool. So people go abroad, people come here, they have good impressions and insights into the countries, and then they go back home. And so the J-1 exchange visitor categories, these are people who are pursuing graduate medical education. So coming here, they have a medical degree, they're coming here for their residency. It's research scholars. And then more broadly, it can be trainees and interns. So people in any field who are earlier in their career. And these can be very easy if you go through a program that already exists, that has a well-oiled machine. Employers can create their own J-1 program. Unless you're going to sponsor a lot of J's and have a really robust program, usually that's not really worth the effort, in my opinion. But on the Department of State website, they have lots of different programs that sponsor different type of foreign nationals and different types of activities in the United States. J-1s sometimes come with a rule that they have to go home for 2 years before they would be eligible for a change of status or to file for their green card. And that's for people who are, like I said, those physicians who are coming here for graduate medical education. It's for people who are on what's called a skills list. So their country said, we want these types of people to come back. It might be all the people, or they just really want their agricultural experts or medical scientists. Each country can choose. Many countries have no skills list, but some countries do, and they want certain people back for 2 years. And then also, if that foreign nationals' own government or the US government helped fund their program, then they're subject to that rule. So just be aware. Don't feel like you have to memorize that, but just know that J's sometimes come with strings. So be careful. So that is exchange visitors. So F1 students, these are students who are here in a full-time period of study. They can work on campus for 20 hours during their studies. They can get what's called curricular practical training, which Suzanne mentioned. This is work that's part of their degree program. It can be part-time, it can be full-time. If it's full-time for over a year, then they are not going to be eligible for additional work authorization after they graduate. And then graduate programs, they can start on CPT right away. And there's this is somewhat disfavored by the administration, but sometimes it's your only option if you're trying to get them under the H-1B lottery and they re-enroll in a graduate program and just keep working for you as part of their new degree. OPT is 1 year of work authorization that F1 students get once they graduate. They get 1 year of OPT per grade level or per degree level. So if you got 2 bachelor's degrees, you only get 1 year of OPT, but they can get one every time they get like a bachelor's, master's, PhD. And then STEM OPT is for people with very specific degrees, sometimes unintuitive, like for some reason nurses are not a STEM field, which doesn't make any sense. But if they have a STEM degree and the employer is E-Verify registered, and it has to be E-Verify is per worksite. It is optional, but it is something that if you register, you then need to basically feed your I-9 verification process through the federal government to verify that people are indeed work authorized. So if you are E-Verify and the foreign national has a STEM degree, then they can be eligible for an additional 2 years. And if you have an amazing employee who is on OPT and you know they're going to be eligible for 2 more years, you should still register in the H-1B lottery each year because it is random. And if you are fortunate enough to have 3 opportunities to register, then you should use all 3 of those opportunities because you don't want to get to the end of their OPT and run out of options.
I'm sorry that I interrupt. We just, a few minutes earlier, we had a question about F1 students. So I just wanted to make sure that the person who asked the question, if we answered it or not, please go ahead and ask again. And I just wanted to clarify in this part, in the CPT, students can work outside of campus as long as it's within their fields. And in the OPT, it's the same thing. And in this part, as Sandra was saying, they do not need sponsorship. That's why Sandra was saying the part about signing up for the lottery all the same. But again, I just wanted to give people some time to ask about this one. We have a question, I believe.
Could I just jump in really? Could I jump in really quickly? So yeah, so just to clarify, so yes, you can work on campus 20 hours without anybody doing anything special. For CPT and OPT, the school's designated school official or DSO, the person who handles all the paperwork, they will have a role to play, but the employer doesn't need to like file paperwork with the government. But there is some paperwork involved, but it's easy for the employer. So I just wanted to clarify that point.
No, that's a great comment. And a lot of the times that's why employers don't know these exist because they don't even find it out. The students and the school officials do all the work. We have a question from Ramona that reads, for CPT on a grad program, what is the limit to hours as part-time?
CPT on a grad program? So, I mean, a lot of people will work full-time on CPT during a graduate program, and the only limit is whatever the program. So the DSO and the program would be the ones to limit that. But I've seen a lot of scenarios where the graduate degree program involves full-time CPT.
And if so, if they have a full-time job on CPT, does that affect the amount of time they can do OPT once they graduate?
Yes. And honestly, the one thing I'm questioning in my own head, so I can tell you for sure for undergrad, if you have 1 year of full-time CPT, then that will mean that you don't get OPT. I am not 1000% sure that the rule is the same for graduate programs. And if whoever asked wants to email me and follow up, I can find out for sure. It's a little bit different. The rules around CPT, like when you can start it and how much you can have, are slightly different for graduate programs.
Yeah, sure. We're going to also send people information out after this, so we can follow up on that one as well. And yeah, just to clarify again, the CPT would be the part in which it's the work permit while students are still studying, and the OPT is once they graduate. Yeah, I think that was the only question. So sorry I interrupted.
No, I prefer it because like I just pick up speed and then I just talk faster and faster, and that's not good. So so yeah, and then premium processing is available for OPT and it's slightly less. I think it's $16.85. So just flagging that. So I did want to talk briefly about the green card categories, just really high level so people are aware. So there are EB1 categories. These are aliens of extraordinary ability that I'll be talking about, and then outstanding professors and researchers. There is another EB1 category, but I'm leaving out intra-company transferees for this conversation because I don't think that's going to be that relevant. There's also, so EB is employment-based. So that's what the EB stands for. And then we have tiers. So EB2, so second tier down, these are for people who, EB2 generally is for people who have advanced degrees or the equivalent, or are of exceptional ability. And under this category, there's something called a national interest waiver. That's a very flexible option for foreign nationals looking to sponsor themselves for green cards, but employers also can. And then under that advanced degree professional EB2 and also EB3, which is just your regular professionals and skilled workers, there is the most common type of employment-based green card, which is labor certification-based green cards. The two EB1 categories I wanted to mention is they are basically structured that there are all these buckets and you have to show you fit into at least 3. So have you had awards? Have articles written by you? Have articles been written about you? Have you been the judge of your peers in competitions or maybe grant reviews? So there are all these different categories, and you just show that you can check at least 3 of those boxes. And you can show you're extraordinary. And that is totally self-sponsored. Employers don't need to file it. And then outstanding requires an offer by a company. National interest waivers waive the requirement of the labor certification, which I'll talk about next. And so it's the same 2 steps as the EB1 categories. And these are more about context than about checking boxes. So just to give some random examples, we do these a lot for medical scientists. You know, right now we have a client working on Parkinson's disease. And so obviously that's really important. It impacts the whole country and the whole world. Sometimes I've had it for people who were like researchers in education. So people who like we're looking at like how we teach like STEM in high school across the country. And so we could show that that was really unique and had national impact. People can work for private companies and still get a national interest waiver, but you do need to be really clear in how, even if they're working for a single company, the work that they're doing is having a broader impact, and that can be done. So yeah, that's national interest waivers. And then I love this picture because whenever I'm meeting with employer for the first time, I always ask them if they know what a Rube Goldberg contraption is. And this is one. It's when a bunch of things happen that are random and then at the end something happens. So the labor certification process doesn't make any logical sense at all. But if you do all the things, at the end a green card happens. And the point of the process is for you to do all these very specific things to show that you cannot find enough or a single qualified interested U.S. worker for the offered position. And while the process itself is not logical, the actual process, you know, no employer would do it if they could find a bunch of qualified, interested US workers to do these jobs. It's just a very dumb process. But basically, you do a series of recruitment that is not very realistic for the real world way that you recruit. And then you show that none of the applicants who responded are qualified for the position. And then you show that, in fact, the foreign national does have the qualifications you need and that you can afford to pay their offered salary. So that is the labor certification process. And that's actually the most normal way that somebody will get a green card based on their work. But the reason I like to talk about national interest waivers and EB-1s is that labor certification process, it can be a lot. So if you can skip it, it's always great. So just some really high level tips for surviving the current moment we're in. Start sponsorships early. You can file petitions for workers 6 months in advance. Start right away. Don't wait to the last minute because you never know what's going to happen. Work with an attorney. The process is so convoluted already, and they just keep changing the rules. So it's good to have an attorney whose job it is to just pay attention to all of the new curveballs that they keep throwing. Document and explain your case really thoroughly and clearly. Now is the time to take the kitchen sink approach with everything you do when it comes to immigration. And then accept that the timelines, how long things are going to take, and what's going to happen are just not as predictable as they used to be. I remember under the first Trump administration, I had this thought one day that I was becoming a worse attorney because I was like, I don't know how long anything takes anymore. And then I realized it's just because you just don't know anymore. And that really didn't stop under Biden. But just, be ready to kind of go with the flow, start early so that you don't have to be nervous. And that includes green card sponsorships. So if you have an employee who is just fabulous, don't wait until the last minute to start their green card process, start it right away. And then speak up to your congressional representatives. And if you are having an experience that's keeping you from hiring and retaining a really talented employee, they need to hear those stories. And when the system works, they can also hear those stories, about how important immigrants are to the workforce and to their constituents and to the companies, employers, and their districts. So now is the time to speak up and share your stories. And that, I believe, is my last slide. So I think I've got 2 minutes left if anybody has any questions for me. And I can go and chat too and answer questions as we continue.
Thank you, Sandra. We answered a couple, but I still would like to ask one of the questions in the chat, where I think it's the only one we have. CPT off campus is also 20 hours as full time, right? So you could work off campus here around 19 hours without impacting anything. Yeah, I answered a little bit, but I wanted to hear you.
Yeah. So CPT doesn't have to do with on campus, off campus. The 20 hours on campus is just a blanket rule. That would be like working in the mess hall, or being a teaching assistant in class. And that doesn't need specific permission. But CPT is a much more flexible work authorization and does not have to be on campus.
Great. And also there's the part about the number of hours you can work. So I was just checking to make sure that I am giving the right information. And please, if anyone in the call disagrees or has any other information, but under 20 would be part-time. And so with part-time, there's no limit for the amount of time they can do the CPT. The limitation is prior. Sandra was saying that you need to have been a student for at least a year. So that's why people doing their undergrad, they cannot start applying for their CPT as soon as they arrive, whereas sometimes when they are grads, that may change. But if they work part-time, there's not a limit for the CPT. The limit comes when they work full-time, which would be over 20 hours, if I'm not mistaken. And in that case, they may have some limitations when they apply for their work authorization once they graduate. So the question was asking about the best combo in a way. and it could be, I guess, under 19 for CPT, so that you get the full benefit of the after graduation work authorization, where while at the same time you can do the while being a student work authorization for as long as possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I would say work with the DSO, like the student employee can work with their designated school official, because that is their job to kind of help them navigate this and make sure they're complying with all the rules, make sure that their records are up to date, so that ICE is happy with them. Maintaining really close communication with the DSO is really helpful as you're trying to like parse through how to maximize your employment opportunities as a student.
And I think we have time for maybe one more question. So if anyone has any lingering thoughts, if you want to unmute or put it in the Q&A box.
We had a question for Suzanne, which I think we didn't see in time. I don't know if we can address it now, but there's one that says, Suzanne, are you familiar with the IWE Inclusive Workforce Employer Program used in regions of Minnesota? And if you are, do you know how it compares to the Mosaic program?
I am not familiar with that. No, I'd like to look it up though. Tell me again the acronym. What is it?
I/we. So it stands for Inclusive Workforce Employer. And we can do some research as well, and whatever we find out, we can send out in a follow-up email.
Thank you.
And one thing too, I wanted to highlight, and Sandra, you were just alluding to that, and we've brought up this multiple times as we're connecting with employers, is that we see OPT and CPT as the great opportunity to get to start engaging with international students because they don't require any fees from the employer. As Sandra mentioned, the school will work, the university staff will work with the student themselves, trying to get that sorted out. So it is a great way for employers who might have never hired international talent and they want to get started out. That's a great way to get connected, post the position online, as we heard from Samantha last time, on how to design those positions, and then CPT, OPT would allow you to hire an intern or someone after graduation, and there's really nothing employers have to do as part of that. I do see one comment in the chat that says also for CPT, the work must be part of their curriculum. So students, for instance, in the College of Business at MSU, they have to be registered for an internship or co-op as part of their CPT period. So there are some requirements that students have to fulfill. For instance, if they're doing an off-campus internship, they would have to be enrolled in a credit as part of their studies. But again, that's something that the university and the students will find out. So we're trying to inform employers as the different options, but do know that, as we've mentioned throughout the webinar, there are staff, there are people who can help you along the way. And a lot of times the student and the university will do a big lift of that process. But with that, thank you again, Sandra. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A. I'm looking at both. I don't see any. And with that, we would like to thank you again, Sandra. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us and we'll make sure we pass those along. And we would like to introduce our next and final speaker for the day, Celeste Voss, who's a talent acquisition leader at Bolton and Menk. And with that, so talent acquisition leader at Bolton and Menk and certified professional in human resource and a Mankato native, we would like to welcome Celeste Voss, and would like to ask you to introduce yourself for the group.
Nice to see everyone today. Thanks for joining us today to learn a little bit about hiring international students. It's something that Bolton and Menk we're proud of here, and I'm going to share my story. I don't have any slides, so I'm just here to share my story. I hope that's fine. So I have been with Bolton and Menk for just over 10 years, and I have been through, I guess, I started as the only recruiter here at our company, and that was back in 2015, and we had about 320 employees at that time and about 15 office locations, and most of our office locations at that point in time were kind of in rural areas. think Sleepy Eye. We were in Mankato. From there, we have definitely grown. We now have over 1,100 employees now, and we have 38 office locations. We now have office locations in large metropolitan areas, but we still focus on our small rural communities as well. And so I feel as though looking at the international students and the opportunities that they have with Bolton and Mank, you know, we kind of meet them where they're at. So if they're going to school at MSU, we have opportunities here in the Mankato office. If they're looking for opportunities in the Twin Cities or North Carolina, South Carolina, Colorado, we are in those markets as well. So our specialty areas is engineering. We're an engineering consulting firm. We help with planning. We hire a lot of civil engineers, and within civil engineering, there is a lot of specialty areas as well. So think water and wastewater engineers. So we have clean water to drink, and we're able to flush our toilets. We have transportation engineers. They help us with trails and highway projects and all the lovely roundabouts that we have in our area. And then we also focus though on architecture. So we have landscape architects, we have architects that are putting up vertical buildings. We also have planners on our staff. We have GIS. And so all of these areas kind of have the opportunity to bring in, I guess, different perspectives to our organization. So with having over 1,100 employees now and over in 6 states, 38 office locations, part of my role now has changed a little bit. I'm helping lead the pack. So we have a team of 10 talent management generalists across the organization that are really doing the hands-on recruitment and working with different colleges and working with our hiring teams to help make sure that we're filling the needs that we have at our organization. So part of that is we typically hire anywhere between 100 and 120 interns every season. And so our season starts in May and runs through August. And so we do look at international students for our internship opportunities. And so they come in as the F1 OPT status. And so that I'm going to talk a little bit more about kind of how we operate in that way. But hiring interns and new grads and professionals across the civil engineering space, there's dwindling numbers. And I know I'm not probably the only person that feels that in our industry, but making sure that we are able to continue to grow as a company is very important. And so I feel like hiring international students, it's not just educating our talent management team, it's also educating our hiring managers and getting them to kind of, I don't know, open their mind to the different perspectives and diverse thought that comes in when an international student joins our team. And I think for me particularly, I studied abroad in Spain when I was in college, and it was the best experience I ever had. And although I didn't work when I was in Spain, just being there for that first 2 weeks and being like, oh my gosh, why am I here? And this is so hard. I don't hardly even know Spanish, and I don't even know how to find a phone to call my parents. And back in that time, you had to go find the internet cafe and, to send an email back and forth. So I feel like I have a little bit of empathy for international students because they do have to be adaptable. And, they have a lot that they're kind of on their plate. And for them to want to go through school here in the United States and then get some experience under their belt, I just think that's awesome. And so if we can help them along their way here at Bolton & Mank, we're all for it. So a little bit about where we are at Bolton & Mank. So I mentioned that we hire over 100 interns. This season, we're at 111 so far, and it's April 14th. We have a few more that we're going to be hiring. And we have hired over 200 full-time hires as well, typically through the year. And so of that, we usually look at our internship for the CPT. We usually, I would say, hire maybe 5 to 10 international students in our organization. And then to fill our entry-level positions, we also work through the OPT status as well with individuals. So right now, we have about 9 people that went through the initial round of the H-1B process this spring. And of those 9, we only had 1 person that made the lottery. So that's depressing and sad. Because this could actually have been somebody's second round as well. But we continue to go through the process with these individuals because they're great teammates for us, and they do a great job for us. So once they kind of get through that OPT status and get through that lottery, then we go through that. Then they have the H-1B status, and at that point in time, making the rounds to get their green card. Is what we are doing here as well and starting that process. So as Sandra was talking about starting the process early, that is what we do here at Bolton & Mink as well. So we are E-Verified employee. So we do follow the I-9 process, and we go through E-Verify for all of our employees that are with us. And part of that process, I think, is easy for us with the software that we're using. It helps us remember, okay, you have a CPT student that they're going to be expiring here, let's say August 16th. And so just making sure that we're in communication with the hiring manager and making sure that we're in communication with the intern that's on board with us as well. And offboarding is just as important, I think, as onboarding. We want to have an easy experience, and hopefully maybe they come back as an intern for us that next season. And, if performance is good and everything kind of lines up and they want to return back to us, then once they are hired as a OPT student, getting them all their ducks in a row already so we can get them going in January for their H-1B. So I feel, like I mentioned, we typically hire in May. And so for students that are graduating in May, they missed the boat of that first spring lottery. And so then they will be on board with us for 6 to 9 months. And so we get 6 to 9 months of performance that we get to, review and see if this is an individual that we do want to make sure to go through that process with them. CPT, it does not cost anything for us. Usually the students are really good about having all their paperwork that they need. And they have great communication, I feel like, if they need something from Bolton & Mink. So, we provide them with their internship offer letter, and that's something that they need as part of the process. But sometimes start dates can change here and there. And so we just make sure as part of our talent management team that we're getting them the updated memo or offer letter that they need to make sure that they have everything in line for the paperwork to be here on their CPT. With the OPT status, I also wanted to mention, so most of our employees that we go through that process, since we're a civil engineering firm, they do fall under that STEM extension. And so many times they're here then for 3 years. So we get to go through that lottery process 2 to 3 times with these individuals if they don't get it that first time. I have some other things. I didn't know if you wanted to ask questions, Alejandro or Handra, or how you wanted to kind of go about the next steps.
Yes, I did have a few, and you've touched on quite a few of them, explaining how Bolton & Mink navigates the different pathways, and you are painting that clear picture that we're trying to get employers to understand a little bit. We see CPT and OPT and as experiences where, as you said, they can use that to hire an intern during the summer for a full-time position, or hire part-time while they're going to school, and then hire after graduation. So you can sort of test that relationship, because it is both ways. It isn't just the student trying to find if the employer is a good fit, but for employers too in Greater Minnesota to get their feet wet and find out, is this a good relationship? Is this working out? Then I would consider those other long-term options that Sandra pointed out to. You mentioned too the different unique skills that they bring in terms of the technical but soft skills. And I was wondering if you could please share an example of a success story that you've seen in the organization, or multiple if you have, when hiring an international student has had an impact in your team, and how could other employers learn from that?
Yeah. So I did mention, international students, they tend to be able to adapt quickly. And they have that diverse perspective that they kind of bring in because they're being shaped by their own cultural background and experiences. So one thing that I really think is neat about what I get to do on a daily basis is, we phone interview and we interview with students on a daily basis, and just learning about why they're passionate about certain areas of engineering is something that I'm just curious about, and I think that's a fun part. So many students that I've interviewed that have been international students, I've chatted with a few students that their focus is water resources engineering, and their passion is totally different than, you know, in I would say a Midwestern engineer who's interested in, you know, clean lakes and rivers and streams, because they like to be outdoors and they like fishing and, you know, but when I talk to international students, they've lived in third world countries and they don't have clean water and they're carrying buckets. And I mean, it's the way that they are living, it's totally different here in the United States. And so learning that they're passionate about it because they want to bring something back and give back to their own community or their own country in some point. And you know, implementing new engineering processes for their own home country, I think that is really cool. And if we can be a part of that story, that makes Bolton & Mank not a regional firm, but a global firm, bringing some Bolton & Mank, I guess, engineering practices back to their home country. But I also have another one. So this is interesting because math is math and science is science. It doesn't matter if you are in America or if you're in Spain or if you're in Africa. So some international students, they have previous professional experience under their belt as well. And so, you know, we had an individual, she was a water resources engineer. She still works for us and she's awesome. But she interned for us first, and she's a water resources engineer in her home country for 6 years. And then she came back and got her master's degree with us at Iowa State. And so she's currently working for us, but the hiring manager was just blown away. Once she got on board with us and kind of got onboarded and felt comfortable, I mean, she just blows the rest of the design engineers out of the water because she has that 6 years of experience from her home country. And, you know, once you get integrated here in the United States and kind of figure out the standards and all that, I mean, math is math and science is science. And so she's doing really great here. And those are some good stories that I think are fun to share.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing your experience. It sounds like you have a big team and have a lot of resources. We do get employers sometimes who are smaller or might have never hired international students. So given the vast experience you have navigating this, I'm wondering if you could share a few action steps, suggestions, recommendations that you have for employers that they could take as first steps or as they're trying to try it out and maybe considering hiring an international student.
Yeah. So strategies that we kind of use, I would say we do get a lot of student referrals, which I think is good. So once you start hiring international students, they will talk amongst their friends that are also international students, and you know, hopefully they have a good experience with you, and then they will refer their friends. And so that, of course, is awesome when we get referrals that way. We also look back at past applications that come through that we may have interviewed, and maybe that individual went to a different firm, or maybe they went public and went to work for the DOT. We'll reconnect with those students and see, you know, how did their internship season go? Would you be interested in you know, considering us next season? So we always kind of look back at past applications. When you're at career fairs or even on your job postings, we make sure that we spell it out that we are open to OPT and CPT students. Now, not every one of our positions are open to that. And so, but most of our positions are. And so when we are posting on Handshake or our other job posting sites within the colleges, we do make sure that we mention that. So students know that it's okay to say yes, that you would need some sort of sponsorship to work with us. I personally, I know that there was a conversation that was a couple month or so ago. Making sure that students are entering the information correctly on the application, I think, is really important. So if they are needing sponsorship, or if they're here on a student visa, we need to know that in talent management so we can plan ahead for that. Because the worst case scenario is if they say no, they don't, and then they're getting started and they're at their first day and talent management or HR doesn't have anything ready to go for them. I feel like being more prepared in the front end is going to be a lot easier as you go through the process. So we also look at, when we're looking to hire individuals here at Bolton & Mink, I think Suzanne mentioned it. We're looking for the best and the brightest, right? Everybody wants the best and the brightest to be working for you. And so as we're a consulting firm, we're working with different communities. We're working with the DOT. And so we do want the best of the best to come on board with Bolton & Mink. And so when we do that, we are looking at education. And so we just need to make sure that their education aligns with what we need for our positions. So we're specifically looking for civil engineering students. There are different programs like biosystems engineering or water wastewater engineering, water resources engineering. And so those are all a focus on what we do here. We don't do mechanical engineering or electrical engineering. And so those students, if they would apply for our internships, they do get disqualified because they're not qualified for our roles. So just making sure that their education is aligned is good. We also, for all of our positions here at Bolton & Mink, we're usually looking for previous internship experience or work experience. We do hire a few, interns that might be freshmen, but most of the interns that come on board with Bolton & Mink, they might have already had some sort of internship or work experience under their belt. We also like to see leadership or student group participation. And so that's another way that we also engage at the college level is working directly with student organizations and doing presentations for their student groups, or we might do tabling events at colleges, or go into the classroom and do presentations as well. And so that helps with recruitment branding. So I wouldn't say that we specifically call out international students in our recruitment branding, but it's all encompassing with the civil engineering students that we're talking to. Communication skills is definitely something that we look at as well because we're a consulting firm. We're working directly with clients. Our interns and our new hires, new graduates that are coming on board with us, they're out on project sites. They're talking with residents, they're talking with contractors, they're talking with business owners. And so they do have to have very good communication skills. Both oral and written communication is definitely key. And so, sometimes obviously English is not their first language for many of these international students, but I don't really feel like that has been a hindrance for any of our interns. They have great communication skills and they probably have better English when it comes to written communication. So we also ask why they're passionate about, why did they go into civil engineering in the first place? And so that's when you really get those stories about, they want to bring back some engineering or make it better at their home country at some point in their career. And so if we can be a part of that story, I think that is meaningful here at Bolton & Mink as we give back to communities.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I'm going to open it up for questions. I would love to see if anyone from the audience has any questions. And I see a few comments in the chat.
I just wanted to make sure, Celeste, that you notice that there are at least 2 comments thanking Bolton & Mink. We have one from Aaron Batch saying that he knows that your organization has been a wonderful partner to Minnesota State for many years. He's a civil engineer himself, so got one about that and another one about making a great point about your organization also being global when it comes to helping international students developing resources in their home countries.
Yeah. I think there was a question on here that what is the biggest challenge that maybe we face in hiring international students? And I think the lottery is a big challenge because not only we don't have any control, we can do all the paperwork and get everything in on time, and then it's really just a crossing your fingers kind of situation. And I haven't won the lottery yet in my life. I don't know. I've won bingo a few times, but that's about it at Eagle Lake Bingo. But the lottery is it's a lot of stress also on our staff, on our employees. Not only the employees that want to get their H-1B, but also our supervisors that, you know, these individuals are making a real impact on our teams and within Bolton and Mank. And so it's a real bummer when they don't get chosen for that lottery. And so it's really just there to support our employees as they go through that second or third round. And I feel like that's something that we do a pretty good job of here at within our talent management team is making sure of that. But I would say that's a pretty big challenge. I guess not every company also has the funds that they can go through the H-1B process because, you know, CPT and OPT, that does not cost anything for an employee to, or for an employer to go through that process. But once you set up and you go through that H-1B process, I mean, it could be $10,000 or more. You're working with immigration attorneys. It's time as well as the cost of that. But you also look at the flip side of, you know, you have somebody that has worked here for 2 years, they're fully trained. What is the cost of having to refill this position and how long is it going to be vacant? And so those are the things that we weigh at Bolton and Mank as well. Because we're fully invested in these employees and we want them to work for us just as much as they want to stay with us. So.
Thank you, Celeste. We appreciate it. And I think that's a very good closing comment that leads us into our next and final agenda item of resources. We would like to again highlight that we have a vast number of resources that Mercedes is going to point to. The meetings are recorded and you're going to be able to access that. And want to thank again all of our speakers and would like to pass it to Mercedes so she can close us off.
Yes, thank you, Ale. Thank you to all our speakers. I know we only have a few minutes left, so very quickly, I just wanted to mention again, I'm not going to go through this for a long time because we also mentioned it last time, but there were a lot of questions about the CPT, so I just wanted to remind everyone that we created some resources in which hopefully we explain this in a clear way. So we have the toolkit in which we explained the CPT and all the different pathways along with the different visa options, some of the visa options that Sandra mentioned as well. And we have the handout, which is just a shorter version with some clear actionable steps for employers who are doing this, who are hiring international students for the first time, and a few numbers and statistics that are also related to some of the comments that Celeste was just saying, maybe the change of turnover, how long positions are going to be vacant, and it's going to help people make informed decisions. All of this can be found in our website. I think I have one slide here with a QR that leads to our website and where you're going to be able to find these resources, and we're going to send them out, or we're going to send out the information on the website in a follow-up app email. Just as a last comment, I wanted to invite everyone, or at least let you know about upcoming opportunities by other organizations. Global Detroit is organizing, which is an organization that is also working with the integration of immigrants into the American workforce. They are also going to hold a webinar. It's going to be on May 1st. We can send out this information if you will. And we also want to mention the Global Workforce Opportunities event that GreenSim is organizing on April the 24th. This one is going to take place in Mankato. The other one is obviously it's online. This is an in-person event. And they are also going to refer to some opportunities in relation to free legal advice, or at least some employers who might be eligible to obtain legal advice at no cost. So I just wanted to mention that again. Here's our QR. But with that, I just wanted to thank you all for attending. Reiterate what Ale said. If there's anyone who has a question that we don't get to address, please feel free to email us or write in the chat. We're going to send everyone a follow-up email with some resources and reminders. And Again, thank you all for being here. Thank you to our speakers. You have been awesome, very clear, and we appreciate you all. We'll keep in touch.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Bye, everybody.